going on, everybody? I'm Max Ralph.
Seth Engle.
Want to Know podcast. We're coming at you on Zoom this week. It's a big week. It's a really big week for Penn State. It's whiteout week, which, I mean, in itself is a big deal, not just from the game environment, but to recruiting and everything. But also, Penn State just took a really ugly loss last week that we've talked about a lot in various forms. But this is just an important week overall from a program standpoint, a needed win and just a lot of stuff going on around the program. But before we get into that, just remember the Want to Know podcast is sponsored. Shout out Ocean State Job Lot again. If you guys haven't shopped there yet, our exclusive podcast sponsor is Ocean State Job Lot. They're the discount place that gives you a value on everything in the store. And as college students know, just like me and Seth, anytime you can stretch that dollar, it's a win. Where are they located? They're right on East Avenue, just 5 minutes off campus, whether it's stocking up for the next tailgate at Beaver Stadium, big whiteout game against Minnesota, or making sure you guys have everything you need during the week for your dorm room. Ocean State Job Lot is a must-stop shop for snacks, scarves, hoodies, health and beauty supplies. Like, they got everything, so much more. Spread the word to all your friends and visit oceanstatejoblot.com for more info. Once again, thanks Ocean State Job Lot. But let's talk about Minnesota now. So this week's been kind of interesting. We've kind of finally gotten some discussion about the quarterback situation at Penn State that we haven't necessarily gotten from James Franklin and the staff as of late. This week at Michigan, Sean Clifford left with an injury for a little bit at the end of the game. And then on Tuesday, James Franklin was asked about him. And on Wednesday, we saw him practicing. So, Seth, let's just break down quickly kind of the quarterback discourse that we've had this week.
Right. So, I mean, I think what happened was after that loss, obviously Clifford goes out in the fourth quarter. Aller comes in. Some people start to see this as kind of handing the torch a little bit. And it presented this option for Penn State, that fans saw as, maybe we won't settle for a 2 or 3 loss season with Clifford. How about we scratch all that? We just start Aller for the rest of the year, settle with maybe a 4 or 5 loss season. So those are the two options Penn State had going into this week, whether they're going to continue with Clifford and potentially have the best chance to win moving forward this year, settle with, maybe a 2 or 3 loss season, which in some ways is a success, or go with Aller, start him for the rest of the year, develop him, and whatever happens, happens with that. So that was originally the discussion. And that latter opinion, was relatively popular by fans. There are a lot of people who have wanted Aller to start since week 1.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what happened there. We saw Sean Clifford practicing on Wednesday. We didn't actually see him throw the ball, which was interesting. Right. It wasn't asked about, but he was out there running at least, and he was in pads. So he's practicing. Franklin names him the number 1, says they're sticking to the plan for now. Yursich today, he spoke all about why Sean Clifford deserves to start. Franklin said he deserves to start, didn't say why. Yursich said it's because of leadership, it's because of toughness, and it's because of the ability to adapt in different situations, such as the Purdue game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. I think it's it's something that we've talked about plenty of times. It's the discussion. It is what it is. It goes from, like you said, win now or prioritize the future. And it's kind of a tough spot to be in for Penn State, because if you ask me, I think the most important thing right now is to try and restore faith in this program. Right. And I think that the way you do that after going 11-11 over the past 2 seasons is doing everything you can to win 9 or 10 games this year. I think that is how success should be measured this season. Drew Aller's he's played in 5 games. I mean, he's gotten more experience than other backup quarterbacks have gotten in the past for Penn State. You'd love to have more. But the thing is, like, if he doesn't start a game this season, he's still going to have an entire spring, an entire fall training camp next year to be the guy and to get the experience that he needs to be able to start doing those things that Sean can do right now. I think for me, like, it's just a tough spot to be in. But I think for me, Penn State should prioritize winning games this season and trying to make a good bowl game, trying to just prove that like those last 2 seasons really weren't what this program's supposed to be. And like I said, it's a tough spot to be in because there's a valid argument on both sides. But I just think that there are so many people, like from fans to boosters to recruits, that just need to see Penn State put together a better season than it's done recently.
Right. And people kind of look at a loss to Michigan or Ohio State as the end all be all. Obviously, that's the big goal when you're in the Big Ten East. If you want to win the conference, you have to beat Ohio State and Michigan. You play them every year.
Right.
But that's not always going to happen. I know beating Ohio State and Michigan in the same season is something that hasn't happened in a long time. And it's obviously been, the goal every single year.
Mm-hmm.
But you can look back on a season. If you're done with the regular season, you only lost 2 games and it was to, 2 top 10 teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Back, that's a successful season. And I think a lot of people are missing that point right now where they're seeing Penn State lost 1 game. I think what's making most people angry is how bad that loss was. It wasn't competitive at all. Yeah. But if Penn State is able to show, as the season goes along that, maybe that game doesn't necessarily represent them. Maybe the team is, they're not a bad team. They lost that game.
You're right.
I think a lot of people are going to look back and look at this as a success on the season. But that's
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I self-plug here. I wrote about that in my weekly column, Let's Be Frank. But the fact of the matter is, like, Penn State's just not on the same level as a program at this present moment as Michigan and Ohio State are. Those are 2 teams that are, well, Ohio State's a perennial powerhouse. We know that. Michigan seems to be that right now. But even if something changes where Michigan isn't just, consistently good in the next couple of years, Jim Harbaugh has built his team to be successful in this window right now. Like last year, they went to the playoff. This year, they've got a ton of seniors and a couple of younger, really dynamic players like JJ McCarthy. Like this team is built to win right now. So the thing is, Penn State's just not in that window right now. And that's the thing that I think has been really hard for fans to grasp is there's 120, 125 FBS programs that just aren't going to make a playoff and aren't at the highest level of college football. And right now, Penn State's probably in the 110 that are like, it's probably ahead of 110 of those teams, but Penn State's just not, it's not there right now. But that's another reason why I just think that you need to understand that 9, 10 wins, even 8 wins is really just what you were looking for out of the season. You just needed to see that this is a program that has some resolve and can come back from a tough year, come back from a tough loss, and just have some success so that you eventually can have those windows of success like Michigan is having right now, like Tennessee's having right now. I mean, just beat Alabama. Hendon Hooker is awesome. Like that's where this program is at right now.
Yeah. And following up on what you were talking about before, where you're kind of comparing where Penn State and Ohio State and then Ohio State, Michigan, and then Penn State are. I mean, I think the question a lot of people are asking themselves right now is why isn't Penn State in that same category? Why is Michigan more competitive? Because when it comes to recruiting, which is something Franklin talks all about, he talked about it after the Michigan game. He talks about recruiting. Well, Penn State has recruited better than Michigan in the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not behind there. They're bringing in the talent. So why is Michigan now, a win now team and Penn State isn't? I think that's the question a lot of people are asking themselves. And I think they take that out on Franklin because it's like, who else are you going to look at when you have the talent there? And you have had talent. You've had guys like Micah Parsons come through the program, Saquon Barkley, like Chris Godwin. You've had these great players come through your program and you still haven't made a playoff in your tenure. I mean, it's hard not to blame Franklin. It's hard not to blame preparation, coaching hires. But I mean, obviously it's much bigger than that, but that's how fans are seeing it at the moment.
Right. And I think the hope for Penn State is that the window of success is starting to open with this class of 2022 recruiting class that was.
The thing is, Max, the window was opening in 2016.
Right.
Like the window had opened and it's almost looked like it's kind of faded away. I mean, you thought that by 2019 or even, 2020 obviously was not, that real of a season, but people thought that 2020 season with a full team, that could have potentially been the year.
Yeah.
That's 2 years down the road. Like we're we're way past that. And it
Mhm.
seems like that window, while it maybe look like it's starting to open in the near future, there have been some missed opportunities there that just haven't, people just aren't sitting right with it.
Right. I completely agree. And it's a good kind of tie-in. Like 2019, that might have been the year. And Penn State is probably an upset loss at Minnesota away from making a playoff that year. You can probably lose one game to Ohio State and be a playoff team.
Yeah.
And shout out Spencer Ripchick, our fellow beat reporter, wrote a really good story this week about that game and how it kind of compares to this season. But the last thing I want to add on this topic before we go right into Minnesota specifically is, like you said, that window closed, and the hope for Penn State is there's a new one opening up, led by the class of 2022 right now. But I think the other hope, at least for James Franklin, is Pat Kraft. There's been so much talk about facilities, about the other 364 days a year outside of game day. That's James Franklin's favorite tagline, that go into winning football games. And it sounds like James Franklin and Pat Kraft are on the same page with those kinds of things, but there hasn't been time for that relationship, that commitment to the program to develop yet. So I think, there's still a lot to play out here as far as, what happens a couple of seasons down the road, 2023, 2024, those are going to be important years for this program, but there's a lot of moving parts. And I think the hope for Penn State, and especially for James Franklin, is that things are on the mend, to say the least. But yeah, I go back to, as my parting shot, an 8, 9, or 10 win season this year is what Penn State needs. But let's talk about Minnesota. We saw practice last night. Sean, we talked about his injury. I think he's going to play. He was there, even though he didn't throw. Like I think he'll be okay.
Everything this week, from what coaches have told us, has kind of led to the plan is not changing.
Right.
I think he's going to play for sure.
Yeah. Kevon Lee was gone from practice, which he hasn't obviously had a huge role, but if he's gone for whatever reason, that's only 2 scholarship running backs for Penn State, and they're both true freshmen. The other one, Landon Tangwall, starting left guard, who got hurt in warmups at Michigan, was not at practice. That's big. I mean, Hunter Norzad played fine last week, and they brought him in for a reason, but Landon Tangwall has had a really good year, and missing him is important. So, and then on the other side,
it's important to know too, Norzad's been a little banged up in almost every game. It seems like he's going down with something.
Yeah. Had some ankle problems earlier in the year and was wearing a lot of tape. But then on the other side, Tanner Morgan, we don't know if he's playing yet. My guess is, like, if I had to guess, I might lean toward no, because he was taken to the hospital straight after the game, carted off the field. And I know there was a update that he was feeling okay, released from the hospital, but there's a lot of storylines to watch as far as injuries go this week. But like we said, this is an important game for Penn State, and one that it really needs to bounce back and win. Seth, break it down for me.
Yeah, so when I look at Minnesota, I see a lot of bits and pieces of Michigan here, honestly, specifically in the offense. I mean, this is a team that whoever their quarterback is, they're going to run the ball a ton. It's exactly like what Michigan does. Doesn't matter if it's Cade McNamara or JJ McCarthy, they're still going to run the ball, through Corum every single time. That's how it is with Mo Ibrahim, who is also one of the best running backs in the country.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Penn State allowed 418 rushing yards last week at Michigan. That's the most it gave up in a game since 1997. That cannot happen. I mean, it can't even come close to that. They're going to have to split that in half, and then also less than that if they want to win by at least a comfortable margin. I mean, Ibrahim's great. His one downside is that he gets injured. Looks like he's healthy now, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue there. I mean, the run game, you just got to stop it. Penn State wins this game if Ibrahim is held to under 120 rushing yards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still a ton of rushing yards, but like, if you look at this guy's numbers, like he's bound to get over 100 every single time.
He's going to carry the ball 25 times at least in the game. So like it's not a bad thing if he has a lot of yards, but you need to avoid the explosive runs, which Penn State struggled so much with against Michigan. Right. The other thing that sticks out to me about Minnesota is just like, my God, they are old.
Yeah, they're
Like
very. I mean, Ibrahim's a 6-year senior. So is
6-year
Morgan.
Morgan's a 6-year senior. He's out for the season, but their top wide receiver, Chris Autman-Bell, is a 6-year senior. Tight end, Brevin Spann-Ford. Defense. I mean, there are 5th and 6th-year seniors all over the board for this team. So like Minnesota was supposed to be competing for the Big Ten West this year and is a good enough team too. Kind of had a little bit of a derailment by losing to Purdue last week, but or Illinois last week. Sorry. But this is the bottom line is this is a good Minnesota team that's got pieces all across the board. Defense has actually outshined the offense, even with someone as good as Mo Ibrahim in the backfield. This is a good Minnesota team that is, it could kind of signal a trap game for Penn State because Minnesota is not in the top 25. It's the whiteout. Like Penn State's going to have to come prepared. But the thing that I have kind of been convincing myself of this week is that this is such an important game for Penn State that like there's almost just like no way they lose it just because like if Penn State loses this game, it's like really bad in my opinion. And I think that
bad.
I think that like this is a situation where Penn State is going to come out with its hair on fire. Like I think James Franklin knows the position that his program's in this week, and I think it's going to be. It might not be like a blowout or anything. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think this is a game that Penn State is going to do everything in its power to win.
Yeah, no, I agree with you for sure. I mean, it's interesting when you take that component of it, but then you also mix in the storylines of, okay, Kirk Sherrock is coming back to Penn State 2 years after he was fired as offensive coordinator. And then you also take into account that other storyline of, well, 2019 could have been the year they made the playoffs, lost to Minnesota. Now they're facing the same quarterback who's now a 6th-year senior. I mean, it's a really interesting team. I think it's going to be a competitive game. I would not be surprised if Minnesota wins this game. I think Penn State will win, like you said, just because of the connotations. Minnesota very well could win this game. I mean, their secondary is among the best in the country. Pass rush is nowhere close to what Michigan had last week. But Penn State actually, did all right against.
Yeah,
it wasn't the worst. I don't think their run defense is anywhere near, what Michigan was capable of either. But I mean, at least in the past game, that should be a problem, which has been, Penn State's strong suit, at least. At least that's what they've gone through. I mean, it hasn't been so successful, but they've tried to go through it when things aren't working out.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with you. Like I said, I think Penn State wins. I think that this is a game that just has so much on the line that Penn State, like I said, is going to do everything in its power to win. But I think this is a good Minnesota team. I think this is going to be a fun whiteout game, and honestly, kind of weird. Like I feel like this has been one of the least anticipated whiteouts I've like experienced in a while. Like I feel like there's just not a ton of buzz yet, and maybe that's just because it's not Friday, but Friday or Saturday.
It's not Ohio State. It's not Michigan.
Right. I think there's a lack of buzz.
Coming off a loss too, people just start to give up.
Yeah. I think there's a lack of buzz, but I don't think there should be because this game is ridiculously important.
Come Saturday, there'll be no shortage of buzz there.
Yeah, agreed. But as far as score goes, I think Penn State's going to do a better job against the run this week. I think it has to. I think Manny Diaz is going to come up with some creative stuff to do a better job there. And as you mentioned, I think Penn State's going to be able to run the ball better against Minnesota and kind of stay on schedule a little better as an offense. I think it's close. I'll go. I think I went 26-17 Penn State. It's kind of an arbitrary number, but I think this Penn State defense is going to do a lot better this week against the run, especially if Tanner Morgan doesn't play.
Yeah, I mean, my score is a little closer than yours. I think Minnesota is going to hold them tight. I got Penn State 24-20, but I mean that took thought. I mean, I almost went Minnesota there.
Yeah, it'll be a good one. Looking forward to it, and a lot of good things to talk about on the podcast today. Thanks for watching, everybody. That's us for the Want to Know podcast. Keep tracking with us online at collegian.psu.edu and online at Want to Know, or on Twitter, at PSU Footblog and Want to Know Pod. Peace.